Good evening and welcome to the March 16, 2020 meeting of the Common Council of the City of Richmond, Indiana. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a prayer from Councilor Cruz Nicholson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm actually going to share a poem with you guys with you all tonight from the Widowed Persons. I'm sometimes so tired and weary that I can't seem to stand, for the road ahead is dreary across life's burning sand. It seems the nights grow longer, and when I can't see the light, if my faith were only stronger, the path would be so bright. Help me, Lord, to find the power to endure what lies ahead. Be my guide every hour as I earn my daily bread. Give me strength enough to rally over hills that I must climb. Lead me through the peaceful valley. Lift me up just one more time. Be my friend when I am lonely. Be my refuge through this storm. When I'm cold or lost or hungry, take my heart and keep it warm. Thank you, Lord, for being there, for loving us so much. And thank you for the gift of prayer that keeps our hearts in touch. Okay.
Thank you, Councilor.
You're welcome.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Doug Goss.
Here.
Kelly Cruz Nicholson.
Here.
Bill Engel.
Here.
Jeff Kaplan.
Here.
Jeff Locke.
Here.
Gary Turner.
Here.
Ron Oler.
Here.
Jane Bumbelow. Here. And Larry Parker.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you, Clerk.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Locke.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the amended agenda for tonight's meeting, please.
Second. I have a motion and a second to approve the amended agenda. What you saw printed out there is amended from what was published 48 hours ago, because an ordinance or two was left off for a time, but now they're back on. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amended agenda is approved. Thank you. In your packet was the minutes of our last regular meeting of March 2nd, 2020. Any additions or corrections?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Engel.
We approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of our March 2nd, 2020 meeting as received. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you. Presentations, petitions, memorials, etc., motions, resolutions. We have a presentation tonight from the Environmental Sustainability Committee. Allison Zeidel.
Hi, good evening. Ooh, thank you. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of a slideshow here, but okay. Back the other way. Here we go. Okay. So thanks for allowing us to speak tonight. We'll make this fairly brief. The greenhouse gas inventory was completed, and I was here in August to tell you that it was underway, but it hadn't been completed because Vectren had not released their numbers to anybody in Indiana yet. So all of the cities that were doing the inventory at the same time were all waiting on Vectren numbers. They finally got them in, and so the inventory was completed. Very thankful to have help from Matt and Kate. They were able to put it into a format that is understandable by everyone instead of the very technical numbers that we were getting back. So just since I know the council is very new and is made up of different people now, just as a reminder, we were a part of a cohort of 14 communities. I keep forgetting that number, 14 communities across the state that were doing greenhouse gas inventories all at the same time. That was supported by IU. And they are doing, through their Grand Challenge, are doing a lot to help Indiana communities deal with the effects of climate change. So all of us were doing that together. We all completed it together, and people are slowly now getting it into these type of formats where we can release it to the public. And Richmond's one of the first communities to have gotten it in that format, so that's a testimony to how well Kate and Matt have worked together to get that done. We are now then part of a second cohort, so IU invited us to apply again to be a part of a cohort now that will then use all of the results from this inventory to then create an action plan. The great thing about that is, once again, IU is supporting that financially to the tune of lots and lots of thousands of dollars throughout the state in both time and expertise, and also ICLEI, which is an organization that helps you do the mapping and the monitoring and everything. They do a lot of the technical pieces for us. So the benefit this year is actually that our new cohort that we are in also includes an extern from IU that again will be paid for by IU. We are putting a small amount in from the Cans for Cash program, which was a program that the Environmental Commission and Sally Hutton raised the money for, so it's just kind of this little collective pool of money that has been there for us to use. So we put in a little bit of skin in the game. They like to show that the communities are participating, but then they have asked, or that they will do the hiring for us. We get to have some influence on what that extern is, and then they will spend the summer helping us write that plan. So it's really nice. They've been insanely supportive, which is great. So the greenhouse gas inventory, and so we were one of 13 communities in 2019. We are now one of 12 moving on then to the second phase that I just talked about to actually make our action plan. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because you have handouts, and so I don't want to go over everything, but I do want to focus on a couple things. In the comprehensive plan, we have the policy statements 7 through 9 under the Protect tab that relates directly to this. So it talks about focusing on alternative energy, monitoring greenhouse gas emissions, and also reducing the emissions. So that's exactly what we're doing, following that plan, and the comp plan will actually be the Environmental Commission's kind of working plan moving forward, and I assume that's the same way for everybody else. The action plan is also specifically recommended in the comp plan on page 53, so that's something to note that we are following along with comp plan as well. We are participating now in weekly webinars to help us prepare for this action plan, and we will also be participating in something called the Hoosier Index, Hoosier Resiliency Index, and what that does is has two things. It helps us assess our climate vulnerability, so it will say, okay, specifically for Richmond, here are the things that are vulnerable to you instead of the whole state of Indiana, because we're all very vulnerable to different things. But then it'll also help us with a readiness assessment that'll say, okay, let's look at transportation, let's look at water, let's look at all these systems and see how ready you are, and then we know where to put energy and time into instead of this blanket approach that may not be appropriate for us. So I will leave actually some of the details, technical details, to Matt to explain, and if you have any questions for any of us, we can certainly take those, but also we have climate scientists through Purdue and IU that are able to answer questions that we can take from you tonight as well. So I'll have Matt come on up.
Good evening. Matt Evans, GIS Coordinator and Interim City Planner. Like Allison mentioned, this has been kind of a little over a year-long project that we had the assistance of a intern from Earlham who worked with us over the summer to work on this, and then after getting the final numbers, a lot of time has been spent in preparing the document, reports, and everything to, like Alice said, make them as accessible as we can. So what I'll do is I'll run through the general results and some of the methodology and everything, and then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. So first we have the sectors, or the kind of different categories of emissions that were measured. We have energy, which includes both electricity and natural gas, and that's split into residential, commercial, and industrial types. Transportation, which includes on and off-road, aviation from the airport, our railroads, and public transportation. We have solid waste, which includes all the processes of the landfill, as well as the collection and transportation of the waste to the landfill. Water and wastewater both includes potable or drinkable water from Indiana American Water and wastewater treatment, and then upstream emission impacts, which is grid loss, which is kind of energy loss as you're transmitting power through lines and all of that. We have 3 different gases that were measured here: nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, and methane, and then in the end we convert those all into a CO2 equivalent for kind of a standard numbers throughout the report. In our overall findings, we have that the energy sector is by far our largest contributor to emissions, and within that one sector, that large bar in the red one on the left is our industrial emissions, and our industrial emissions also account for any large power users, so it's not necessarily just factories. And then also I would mention that in those red bars, the different shaded colors represent the natural gas emissions for each of those sectors. Next was transportation at about 10%, and then it kind of drops off pretty substantially from there into solid waste at about 3.5%. Upstream, like the grid loss factor that I mentioned, is about 3.4%, and then water and wastewater was by far our smallest category. And then within these, we have a breakdown of the actual rounded numbers of the metric tons of CO2 released from each of these. So like I mentioned, our industrial and large power users are our by far largest energy-related sector, and then commercial and residential are approximately equal, but commercial is slightly larger. Within transportation, we have, like I said, on-road passenger, so normal kind of driving cars and everything, on-road freight transportation, off-road transportation, and railroad. And then we had the factors for aviation were so minor that they were substantially less than 1%, so they're not included on that chart. Within solid waste, our municipal solid waste is the largest emitter as it breaks down and releases a lot of methane in the landfill. Solid waste collection and transportation was our next largest, and then landfill gas flaring and industrial solid waste were both substantially smaller numbers within that category. Within our upstream energy loss of the grid loss that I mentioned are, once again, and I think this is probably because our industrial sector was so large, was industrial is the largest, and then residential and commercial are both approximately on equal footing, but not, still commercial slightly larger. And then within water and wastewater, our wastewater treatment was our largest kind of subcategory within that, followed by our drinkable water, and then nitrous oxide effluent discharge was our smallest contributor to that. I had this slide to show our kind of Richmond in context with both the national averages of per capita emissions, so like metric tons of CO2 emitted over the 2018 year per person, and then also compared to other cities across the country that have performed these inventories.
Where's Richmond in that chart?
Richmond is the fourth from the left. It says 23.57, and then also that red line, the upper red line shows the Richmond emissions kind of to compare to all the other communities that are on there. We have 16.06 metric tons as our national average, so we are on the higher end of the scale, but I would mention that, you know, the economic makeup, the industry makeup and everything is very different in all these different cities, so they're going to have different kind of emissions profiles. And then Allison kind of touched on this as well, but I wanted to talk about our next steps, where we were selected to be part of the cohort for the climate action planning, and this includes both emission reduction strategies and adaptation strategies for increased flooding, increased extreme heat days, and those different kind of risks that are predicted with further climate changes. And as Allison mentioned also, we are taking part in this Hoosier Resilience Index, which is kind of a method to look at how prepared are we for these flood events, for the extreme heat and all of that, which addresses 8 different sections, going from emergency management to planning and land use, natural resources, all the different things that are mentioned on there. I would mention also that we have these resources on the City Environmental Sustainability Commission Facebook page, and we'll shortly have the finalized report up on that to review in depth as well. I think that's the end of my presentation. If you have any further questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Any questions for Allison or Matt? Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Communications from the mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will forego the community calendar as gatherings of 50 or more are discouraged at this time, but I do want to take this brief moment here to talk about some of the changes that the citizens are seeing, particularly in their local government. It is important to us to maintain the safety of our citizens and our Richmond City team in this difficult time, and we realize there have been some inconveniences created. However, just please understand it is always for everyone's safety. So as most people are probably aware by this time, we do have limited access to some of our city-owned buildings and some closures of some of our city-owned buildings. You're also seeing cancellations of events, city-led events, particularly from our Parks Department. That will continue for the foreseeable future. Transit will continue as scheduled, our Roseview Transit and Parrott Transit. And essential services such as trash pickup and sanitation, wastewater will continue as scheduled as well. This is really a community-wide effort. Everybody is playing their part. As I spoke of a second ago, no gatherings over 50, and keeping high-touch surfaces clean, work areas clean, gathering spaces clean is very important in this. We were talking with some cleaning experts today and helping us keep our buildings extra clean and sanitized during this process, and they were relaying to us that sanitization is only effective if the area is cleaned. If you have a soiled area, it needs cleaned first, and then it can be sanitized. As I'm sure lots of people are following along, several statements and declarations have come forward from Governor Holcomb, some as statements, some in the form of executive orders. We know that bars and restaurants as of today have been asked to move to a delivery or pickup method only. So some of those transitions are being made. And we know that we have people in a red zone as far as their risk to the spread of this, and those are people that are over the age of 60 with underlying health conditions and those who have compromised immune systems. So we are working with our Richmond City team to allow appropriate time off and appropriate access to health care and testing for those that need that. We are adding cleaning and sanitization services to our day-to-day routine. And because there is more information coming, and because we will see more guidelines, more restrictions, more cancellations and closures, we have created a page on our website that is COVID-19 in Richmond, and so it's a tab you can access quickly from the front page. I've shared it on my social media sites, and it's been shared on our city site. So there you'll find a repository of information, because one of our greatest hurdles right now, since the information is coming fast, there's a lot of misinformation as well. And we have community members that are just confused as to what they should be doing and what guidelines they should be following. So I want to stress to citizens to go to our city website, richmondindiana.gov, click on COVID-19 in Richmond, and there you will find that repository of guidelines, closures, executive orders, and procedures, so that you can use that as a roadmap in how you navigate through your day, again, during this difficult time. So we just wish everyone to stay safe, and just also keep in mind that this, like I said earlier, is a community-wide effort. Our efforts here are to mitigate the spread so as to allow the healthcare system to treat people if they do become ill. If we all don't play a role as a community, we can cause a backup in the healthcare system, which will create a slowdown, which makes more people susceptible, and we see more sickness. So let's all do our part to mitigate this spread and to mitigate the illnesses we see. I'll entertain any questions that you might have for me as it pertains to city procedures in the wake of this current event. I'll do my best to answer those questions, but please understand we are dealing with situations as they arise, so there's a lot of emergent decision making, and some of those we're still working on, some of those we have procedures in place, but I'll try to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. A little bit later, we'll be hearing Ordinance 18-2020, and we'll dig into that a little bit deeper.
All right.
Any other questions for the Mayor?
Thank you.
No, thank you. In your packet were the reports of the Board of Public Works and Safety from the February 27th and March 5th meetings. Any questions or comments? None? Next, we have reports from department heads, standing committees, special committees, and/or organizations. Tonight we have Jeff Kempton from Information and Technology. And fellow counselors, you should know that I, for a time, considered not having these presentations tonight, but since we had to be here for these ordinances we need to work on tonight, we might as well continue with the presentations because we're here. That's how we got to this point. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me speak to you guys tonight. So we have been working on our network switch infrastructure upgrade. We've completed 3 sites out of 19 to this point. Trying to knock off as many as we can within succession. There's a lot of cleanup, a lot of documentation that we're doing that some of it didn't exist before, or was not adequate, or what I find adequate. With that being said, we've actually upgraded the wireless infrastructure in this building. We now have like a guest network that wasn't available before for vendors, public, yourselves, whomever. We have also, Parallax has upgraded our circuit So our internet circuit's actually been upgraded to 50 to 400 megs.
400 meg, okay, good.
Which is a great thing. I mean, we were suffering certain hours of the day with that. They've actually made that upgrade. It was actually no cost increase, which was great, but much needed. So we do have that network now and usable bandwidth. With that being said, we also are working on remote access right now pretty diligently. You know, we had a limited amount of workers who had remote access before. Now we're looking at a large number of, you know, people and how to scale it, things like that. We've been doing that. We'll probably have most departments done hopefully by the end of the week. We'll see, you know, see how far we get. With everything that's going on, it's, you know, necessary in a way that, you know, is kind of unprecedented really, so.
Yes.
We actually hired a new network administrator back in November, Dylan Shirky, so that's really helped our team to get somebody to fill Ronnie's role. Then I still have Grayson on my team, Grayson Pike. Desktop support, does a little bit of everything for us. Just to bring up some people that probably don't normally get mentioned, we've got people in other departments that help out our department as well. We've got Jason Combs, sanitation, helps us out with a lot of desktop support out there as well. Jamie Miller for the fire department, also Joe Buckler in the fire department, and Chris Taylor in the police department. So work goes on, it's been very busy, but we're definitely making some strides, and hopefully things will keep moving forward. And if you guys have any questions, feel free.
Any questions for IT?
Mr. President?
Mr. Engel?
Well, Jeff, what's your staffing situation? Are you full staff?
Full staff right now. So, you know, well, I have 2 people that report to myself. The other parties are, you know, have been around as well. So we're good at the moment. You know, it's, you know, I had an employee coughing heavily the other day. I told him, I said, go home. I just, you know, we've got remote access capabilities. I can probably do 90% of my job, you know, sometimes without being here. Sometimes you need physical hands too, so it's kind of a mix, so.
But you're budgeted for 3
Yes.
full-time employees?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Any miscellaneous business to come before council? Okay, ordinances on first reading.
Mr. President,
Mr. Locke.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules and read ordinance number 13, 2020, 14, 15, 16, and 17 by title only.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and read ordinances 13, 2020, 14, 15, 16, and 17, 2020 by title only. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance 13, 2020.
Ordinance number 13, 2020, a special ordinance amending the zoning map for certain parcels from general commercial district to industrial commercial district.
Who will be speaking to this?
Matt Evans again, and as Karen mentioned, this request is to rezone from a general commercial zoning designation to industrial commercial, located at 3150 National Road West, which is the former Kmart Center. And this zoning change is being requested in order to permit the conversion of the existing building into a multi-use U-Haul center that includes self-storage, truck rental, and small retail for shipping containers and that kind of thing as well. If you have any questions at this time, I'll be happy to address them.
Any questions for the city planner? If not, this will be referred to
Plan Commission
Plan
on
Commission.
March
Advisory Plan
26th.
Commission. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ordinance number 14, 2020, a special ordinance amending the zoning map for a certain parcel from intense multiple family residential district to limited commercial district.
And who will be speaking on this one? City planner again.
Good, yep. And as mentioned, this is a request from the M2 intense multifamily residential to limited commercial. at 1824 Chester Boulevard, and this parcel is directly to the south of the Richmond Eye Center, and this would permit the expansion of the parking lot there and would bring the zoning consistent with all the other Eye Center properties.
So is that vacant lot?
Yeah,
There's
that's
been no
correct.
development?
Yep.
There's a couple of signs maybe, and that's it, a billboard?
Yep, that's exactly
Okay.
right.
So is it 1824 or 1924?
Should be 1824 to my
Okay, it
knowledge.
says 1924 on the
Okay.
agenda.
The agenda. Any questions for Matt? If not, refer this to the Plan Commission? Okay.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 15, 2020, a special ordinance authorizing the City of Richmond to receive donations for Richmond Police Department programs.
And who will be speaking to this?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Major Bales, Richmond Police Department. Richmond Police Department is requesting the ability to accept blanket donations, primarily used in the past for our canine programs. That's very essential to maintaining the level of canine program that we have. It's the most common donation that's made that the community really gets behind, and we'd have a hard time maintaining that program at the level we do without the help from the community. There's a couple other things in the past that we've used donations for. People have made specific donations for our cadet program for our young folks, as well as specific equipment needs for our SWAT team, and a variety of other things. Donations and support from the community definitely help with some of these project needs.
All right. Any questions for the Major? If not, we'll refer to Finance Committee.
Ordinance number 16, 2020, an appropriation ordinance authorizing the submittal, acceptance, and appropriation of reimbursement grants from the Federal Department of Justice.
Again, Major Bells.
This is kind of an uncommon matching fund grant offered by the Department of Justice. We have to purchase the equipment up front, apply for the grant on the back side, and attempt to receive up to 50% matching grant. This year our specific need is our tactical vests for our SWAT teams. That is extremely expensive equipment. It's money that we've budgeted for in 2020 to be able to cover the cost, but if we can recoup a portion of that, that would be fantastic. These vests don't expire at the rate that our regular vests do that we wear on duty every day. They last about twice as long, but they're custom fit to each one of our team members and provide a much higher level of protection for those officers during tactical situations. So we're requesting the ability to apply for this grant once the purchase has been made of this equipment, and if we're fortunate enough to be awarded the grant, accept that and be able to apply that towards that purchase.
Any questions for Major Bells?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Parker.
how many vests can you get for that amount of money?
It's 15 vests. That'll cover our team leader and all of our individual operators and crisis negotiators.
Okay, thank you. 15?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
This will go to Finance Committee too.
Ordinance number 17, 2020, an appropriation ordinance authorizing the submittal, acceptance, and appropriation of a grant from the Indiana American Environmental Grant Program.
And who'll be speaking to this?
Leanne Hahn, Richmond Sanitary Department,
Okay.
pretreatment. This is a grant that does not require a matching fund. What it is it's monies that we look to start a cyanotoxin surveillance program for the Richmond, Indiana watershed area. We have potential partners with Indiana American, Earlham College, USGS, as well as, there's one other, sorry. The Wayne County Soil and Water Conservation Group. So this would be organizational money. It's up to $10,000. It would allow us to organize our group, start some surveillance sampling, and then be in a position to apply for, I'll call it a more significant amount of money next year from other sources.
Is there a time frame on this grant?
There is. The grant is due, March 31st. The monies have to be spent between May 1st and November 30th, 2020.
So if we're going to move on this, we need to move this forward tonight?
Would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the pleasure of council?
Mr. President,
Mr. Goss?
I move that we suspend the rules and then advance ordinance 17-2020 to second reading, read by title only.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and advance ordinance 17-2020 to second reading by title only. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance is now in second reading.
Ordinance number 17, 2020, an appropriation ordinance authorizing the submittal, acceptance, and appropriation of a grant from the Indiana American Environmental Grant Program.
This ordinance is on public comment. Anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition, please approach the podium.
Move for engrossment.
Second.
A motion and a second to engross. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance is engrossed.
Mr. President,
Mr. Goss?
I move that we suspend the rules and advance ordinance 17-2020 to third and final reading, read by title only.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and advance ordinance 17-2020 to third and final reading by title only. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance on third reading.
Ordinance number 17, 2020, an appropriation ordinance authorizing the submittal, acceptance, and appropriation of a grant from the Indiana American Environmental Grant Program.
What's the mayor's position on this?
We always strive to bring everything up in a timely manner to allow it to go to subcommittee, and so we are always amenable to that process. There are just times in grant applications when the time frame hits us very quickly, and so there are occasional times where we will ask for an expedited process in a non-matching grant situation so that there's no financial obligation from the city. So we certainly appreciate your consideration of moving this all the way through for the purpose of applying for this non-matching grant.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from council? No? Clerk, call the roll.
Doug Goss,
Aye.
Kelly Cruz Nicholson,
Aye.
Bill Engel,
Aye.
Jeff Kappa,
Aye.
Jeff Locke,
Aye.
Gary Turner,
Aye.
Jane Bumbelow,
Aye.
Larry Parker,
Aye.
and Ron Oler.
Aye.
All are in favor.
Ordinance passes. Thank you.
First in 4 years.
Ordinance number 18, 2020, an ordinance amending ordinance 40, 2019, 41, 2019, 42, 2019, 43, 2019, and 44, 2019, collectively the 2020 salary ordinances due to emergency circumstances.
Yes, please. This is an ordinance. We did not suspend the rules. We want to read it in its entirety with the hope that we can hear it in its entirety tonight. Thank you, Clerk.
And I'm losing my voice. Whereas the Richmond, Indiana Common Council previously adopted ordinances 40, 41, 42, 43, and 44, 2019, which are ordinances establishing wages and salaries for 2020, which may be amended from time to time. And whereas council acknowledges that under appropriate circumstances, a political subdivision may determine that a disaster exists as defined by the Indiana Code, which includes but is not limited to the following: an occurrence or imminent threat of widespread or severe damage, injury, or loss of life or property resulting from any natural phenomenon or human act, which definition includes an epidemic and public health emergency. Whereas council desires to have in place appropriate emergency management measures in the event that a disaster is declared in order to provide for the preparation and the coordination of all emergency functions to prevent, minimize, and repair injury and damage, with such services to include firefighting services, police services, medical and health services, rescuing, engineering, warning services, communications, evacuation of persons from stricken areas, emergency welfare services, plant protection, other functions related to civilian protection, and all other activities necessary or incidental to the preparation for and coordination of the functions described herein. Whereas a local disaster emergency may be declared only by the principal executive officer of a political subdivision and may not be continued or renewed for more than 7 days except by or with the consent of the governing board of the political subdivision, and any order or proclamation declaring, continuing, or terminating a local disaster emergency shall be given prompt and general publicity and shall be filed promptly in the office of the clerk of the political subdivision. Whereas the effect of the declaration of a local disaster emergency is to activate the response and recovery aspects of all applicable local or interjurisdictional disaster emergency plans, which includes a local travel advisory, and authorize the furnishing of aid and assistance under the plans. Whereas a political subdivision may make, amend, and rescind orders, rules, and regulations as necessary for emergency management, and such orders, rules, and regulations have the full force and effect of law when filed with the office of the clerk of the adopting or promulgating political subdivision or agency of the state if adopted by a political subdivision. Whereas Indiana Code Section 10-14-3-29.5 addresses local travel emergencies which may be declared by the principal executive officer of a political subdivision, which include the following levels: advisory, watch, and warning, with the warning level only being possible subsequent to the principal executive officer declaring a local disaster emergency. Whereas council desires to amend the 2020 salary ordinance to provide for pay for employees in certain declared emergency circumstances. Now therefore be it ordained by the Richmond, Indiana Common Council as follows. The 2020 salary ordinances are hereby amended to add the following additional section: stay home pay during a declared emergency. As part of a local disaster declaration, City of Richmond, Indiana employees may be directed to refrain from coming to work. Additionally, the principal executive officer may determine that non-essential city employees refrain from reporting to work without a formal local disaster declaration application to the city in its entirety if the facts and circumstances so require. For example, city personnel quarantine. These employees will continue to receive pay, hourly and or salary, for their regularly scheduled non-overtime work hours, which would be emergency stay-home pay, without utilizing any paid time off benefits, subject to the following conditions. If some or all of the employee's job functions can be performed at home, the employee is expected to perform these job functions from home with direction from his or her supervisor during the employee's regularly scheduled non-overtime work hours. During the employee's regularly scheduled non-overtime work hours during the emergency, the employee is considered on call and therefore must be available by phone to respond to calls from other city officials, and must be available to return to his or her workstation within 2 hours' notice from his or her supervisor or his or her designee. The employee may not work or earn compensation from any other source during the employee's regularly scheduled non-overtime work hours. For instance, for which the employee would earn emergency stay-home pay. Emergency stay-home pay must be determined by the principal executive officer for any period not to exceed 10 days without approval of a majority of Richmond Common Council. As part of this ordinance, the stay-home pay referenced herein shall also specifically apply on an individual basis to any employee confirmed by his or her health care provider to have contracted coronavirus COVID-19. The take-home pay shall not be applicable to any essential city employees which are exempted from the provisions of the Indiana Code Section 10-14-3. As such employees may still be required to perform their duties as directed by the principal executive as implemented by his or her supervisor. The amendments set forth supersede any inconsistent provision in the 2020 salary ordinances. All other portions of the 2020 salary ordinances shall remain in full force and effect. This amendment to the 2020 salary ordinance shall take effect immediately upon its adoption. Increases or changes in the payment schedule when implemented will be prorated prospectively.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I asked you to read that so our audience members at home citizens and employees would understand what we're trying to do here. In light of the coronavirus pandemic, if it becomes necessary to quarantine people, they will still be paid, but they're also still expected to work if able to work, and essential employees will be expected to still show up to work. Over the course of the last 4 or 5 days, the clerk, the attorney's office, mayor's law office, and I have all worked on this, and HR. And I think we've covered about every base. Does the mayor want to add anything to this? Or the attorney, city attorney want to add to this?
Yeah, had I known we were gonna have the clerk read it in its entirety, I would've gone a little easier on the whereas clauses, so I apologize for that.
All right, I wanted him to know.
I just wanted to cover all of our bases. No, I think it speaks for itself, and as, Dr. Roller indicated, this has been a group effort to try to, put in a response to what may be, something that we can anticipate going forward. We didn't know at the time that I drafted this, if there was going to be an emergency executive order issued by the mayor's office. Well, this morning there was, and when that happens, that puts in motion the ability of the political subdivision to react in different capacities to put in place certain remedial measures, some of which you saw today that are a part of that executive order. It's possible that additional executive orders could flow depending on the circumstances, which we all know are very fluid at this point in time. But what we wanted to do was make sure we were thinking about these types of issues as it pertains to City of Richmond employees, because obviously if we tell people to stay home, that can have an economic impact. So this was all started with our employees in mind, and I think that this ordinance goes a long way toward hopefully addressing some of those issues, at least on a short-term basis. And if it does need to be implemented, then certainly the mayor and I would come back to council within that 10-day time frame for it to be reevaluated.
Yes. And as a fiscal body, it's written in here that this period will not exceed 10 days once it's enacted.
Correct.
Without coming back to Common Council again. Any questions for the attorney or mayor? Mayor have any comments?
I just appreciate your availability, Mr. President, as we've worked through this. There's been a lot of emergent decision-making that's had to happen, and you and I have been on the phone quite a bit, and I just appreciate your willingness to work through this alongside us, and it's been very helpful.
Mr. Chairman.
Of course, yes.
10 days?
10 business days. Once
Business
we enact this,
days.
if the emergency
Okay, thank you.
quarantine's enacted.
It was chosen as a time frame to get us to the next council meeting.
Gotcha. Right.
And emergency personnel, essential personnel work weekends, they wouldn't be affected by this anyway.
Right.
It's more the hourly and salary office workers. Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Kappa.
Mr. Sigmund, I also understand under the governor's order that he just put out yesterday that the state of Indiana is also doing something similar to that. Is that correct?
Yeah, my understanding is that they are doing something similar in that he's requesting, actually ordering that state employees work remotely if at all possible. As far as covering salaries and hourly pay for those employees that can't work, I'm not entirely sure what the status of that is at the state level, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's something similar to what we're addressing tonight.
So basically what we're doing is nothing different than what is happening across the state.
Right, and I think we discussed earlier, Councilor Kaplan, that the State Board of Accounts has issued a memorandum that says we're not going to take exception with these types of things because we understand that at the local level, home rule power really does need to be at the forefront so we can address our situations as they come up on a unique basis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the attorney or the mayor? What's the pleasure of council?
Mr. President,
Mr. Cross?
I move that we suspend the rules and advance ordinance 18-2020 to second reading, read by title only.
A second.
I won't make you read it again.
Oh, come on, Doug.
Motion and second to suspend the rules on ordinance 18-2020 by title only. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ordinance on second reading.
Ordinance number 18, 2020, amending ordinance number 40, 42, 43, and 44, 2019, collectively, the 2020 salary ordinances due to emergency circumstances.
This ordinance is on second reading. Public comment. Anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition, please approach the podium.
Move for engrossment.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to engross. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance is engrossed.
Mr. President,
Mr. Goss?
I move that we suspend the rules and advance ordinance 18-2020 to third and final reading, read by title only.
Second.
Have a motion and second to suspend the rules and advance ordinance 18-2020 to third and final reading by title only. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance on third reading.
Ordinance number 18, 2020, amending ordinance numbers 40, 42, 43, and 44, 2019, collectively known as the 2020 salary ordinances due to emergency circumstances.
Any final comments from council? I appreciate the mayor, the administration, the law office, and HR office on helping to put this together, and I think we've covered all the bases. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Doug Goss?
Aye.
Kelly Cruz Nicholson?
Aye.
Bill Engel?
Aye.
Jeff Kappa?
Aye.
Jeff Locke?
Aye.
Gary Turner?
Aye.
Jane Bubbalo?
Aye.
Larry Parker?
Aye.
And Ron Oler?
Aye.
All are in favor.
Ordinance passed. Thank you. Ordinance is on second reading.
Ordinance number 50, 2019, a special ordinance amending the zoning map for a certain parcel from high-density, single-family residential district to institution district.
And who is speaking on this? Is this RP&L, IMPA, Emily from IMPA? Is it Matt from the planning office? Everybody? RP&L general manager is in the audience. We're trying to turn on the TV for those of you at home and to see a presentation. You might introduce yourself to the audience at home.
I will. Yes, thank you for having me this evening. My name's Emily Williams. I'm with the Indiana Municipal Power Agency, and I'm the project manager over our solar park developments. I have a presentation for you tonight about our request, but first wanted to go over a bit of background about IMPA for you all and those at home as well. IMPA is the wholesale power provider to the city of Richmond. We were started in 1983 when municipal electric utility communities like yourselves wanted to be able to jointly purchase wholesale electric power more cost effectively. At that time we had 11 members. Richmond was one of those founding members, and today we provide power to 60 communities in Indiana and 1 community in Ohio. We provide that power through a diversified power supply portfolio consisting of 524 megawatts of baseload coal. We also have some natural gas combustion turbine units. A couple of those are here in Richmond, Centerville area, and then the others are up in Anderson, and then we have one up in Indianapolis as well. And then we have power purchase contracts, and then I'm here to speak to you about our solar parks. We have 73 megawatts online currently throughout the state at 25 different solar parks. You'll see 15 megawatts of those currently generating here in Richmond on either side of I-70 near the US 40 exit, and then one by RP&L's offices. And then we do have another 24 that are planned for construction in 2020 and 2021. If you're exiting off of I-70 at the Williamsburg Pike exit, you might see that some dirt or mud has been moved around lately. That's us there on Industries Road for our 4th Richmond Solar Park. That one's just a little over 7 megawatts. And then the one I'll be talking to you tonight about is a planned one of about 16 megawatts. And these incorporate in a multi-year power supply diversification plan that IMPA has. Apologize for some of the smaller text, packing a lot of information in here, but really this slide is about how these solar facilities will impact Richmond's energy side of your portfolio and what all the makeup will be. So supposing that we are able to build the solar park that we are proposing as part of our 5th and 6th solar parks, about 8% of Richmond's energy would be coming from the solar parks that are within Richmond Power and Light's electric distribution system. All of our facilities are interconnected with their electric distribution system, so the power generated does stay local. That's about 26% of Richmond's peak, which gets a little screwy on the numbers. I'm sure if some of my engineers were up here, they would fight me on which one to actually point to a little bit more. But in total, if we're able to build this last solar park that we're proposing, we'd be sitting at 38 megawatts. here in Richmond. And that little octagon, hexagon type thing, that just shows what the existing sites are. So at Richmond 4, the new one being constructed at 17 megawatts, Richmond 1 through 3 is 15, and then these next two we're proposing about 16 megawatts. All in all, the total investment would be about $36.4 million here in Richmond. These last two solar parks are pretty sizable, so we're looking at $25.6 million on that investment alone. And then how does this power impact the homes on an annual energy basis is how we look at that. So about 5,600 homes annually would be powered from these solar facilities. The ones that we're proposing at Warrenley Road and 23rd Street would almost occupy about half of that, not quite, but about 2,300 homes is what we'd be looking at. So getting to the solar park that we're proposing, and why we're before you this evening, the property outlined in blue is at 1800 South Warrenley Road, at the southwest corner of Warrenley and 23rd, just sitting west of the Forest Hills Country Club, just south of the Warrenley home, and then the diagonal on the west side of this property is actually the railroad, so there's a nice buffer there. One of the reasons that we did choose this location as being ideal is because of the natural buffers that this property has. You do have a number of trees on Warrenley Road existing already. We've worked with the planning department, and for where those trees aren't currently located, we would be placing trees in their place. And again, the railroad buffers it next to the residence to the west. I've driven back there personally myself, and I think there would be little effect just because of that barrier. And then you'll see kind of on the property's kind of split between 2/3 west of this ditch that goes down the 1/3 east side. As we get to later slides, you'll see that we aren't planning on putting any panels east of that, and we'll discuss that a little bit more. But that's a sizable natural buffer as well. So this is our site plan. We have them lettered A and B because IMPA is not able to build a solar park greater than 10 megawatts, and so we have them split. So they'll be on separate interconnections. That's actually a benefit to our P&L system because we can split them, how the load is going to be hitting these different circuits, which Randy could probably explain a lot better than I. But that's what the property would look like after we built it. Again, you'll see that there's no panels sitting to the east of that ditch line.
What is there east? I can see some red, but I can't tell from here what it is.
So east of the ditch line, there are a couple of houses actually that exist on this property. They're rental homes, and we intend to keep those as they are. Other than that, it's tillable ground in that northeast corner. There's not really much on to the south of that, more tillable acreage.
What I'm referring to is the red on the east of the letter A. Is that text? Or?
It's text.
Okay.
I'm sure it says some sort of setback or something that I made my electrical engineer write, and I can't read. And so this solar park would consist of about 55,000 panels that would be single-axis tracking. That's what you're seeing on either side of I-70 and what's going up at the Industries Road facility, meaning that those panels will track with the sun. Actually, all of your solar facilities in the city have that. That's not, most of ours don't have that when they first were built. You guys were the first test ground for our tracking facility. There on the west side of the ditch sits about 75 acres. Again, 16 megawatts AC, so that's what the actual output of it would be. And then we estimate about 8 to 10 months per construction of each of these facilities. That's about what it's taking us on average across our solar parks. And then because we're here for zoning requests, I do like to talk about the construction, what that looks like. We have talked pretty extensively with the neighbors in this area to give them an idea of what construction would look like as well. The construction would start either at the end of this year or the first quarter of next year, just kind of how the development plan would shake out. We would be taking equipment deliveries off of Warrenley Road, closer to probably the northwest side of the property is looking at this point where we would be putting the entrance. The site would be secured with a 7-foot chain link fence with a foot of barbed wire, which is consistent with how our other solar parks are used. But I will note that that fence would be behind all of the existing trees. We're not planning on taking down the trees except for, old row fences that have been built up in the middle of the field. So the impact of that should be pretty minimal. There will be about approximately 25 workers on site at any given moment, and they'll be using a lot of the resources here in the city. They stay in the hotels and eat at the restaurants, go to Lowe's to pick up hand tools as necessary. And then we'll be, assuming that the coronavirus doesn't just take us on for the entire year. That will be horrific. And then we'll be working with RP&L and then our own line workers to interconnect those solar parks with the system, and then we look to bring both of these sites online sometime in the fourth quarter of 2021. And feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions. And then once the sites come online, we do own the land, and so we are responsible for maintaining the mowing of the grass. It is grass underneath all of the panels, and then we have gravel roads throughout the sites, but we hardly ever have any maintenance at the sites. That's kind of the third picture, is that these sites more or less operate on their own. So we have a couple of operation and maintenance crew members that are based out of our Richmond CT unit, so they can be right there on hand when needed. The solar parks do have a low profile, which will be hidden even more so by the trees existing on this site, and then our additional landscaping elements that we're going to be adding along Warnley Road. And then the noise, I like to say that there's hardly any noise at these sites. You have to stand pretty darn close to the inverters. Usually are the only things that are making any noise, and they have a small computer-like fan in them. So if you're standing even 10, 15 feet back, you're not really going to hear anything. Otherwise, it's transformers and other electrical equipment that you're used to seeing at commercial businesses, industrial complexes, residential neighborhoods. So we're here for the rezoning request. We were before the Plan Commission for a request to change our property from dense residential, R3, to institutional, which is the same kind of zoning class that we had at our Richmond 2 facility. Again, we found this to be a pretty proper use, given that there were such natural buffers on this property that insulated this use from adjacent landowners. We have collaborated quite a bit with the surrounding area. We held an open house at the Forest Hills Country Club and extended the invite to not only those that were abutting the property, but extensively further along. Got a lot of their comments, made quite a few adjustments to our plan. After hearing those comments, originally we had planned on being on the east side of the ditch because there is a tree line along 23rd, but there was quite a bit of cause for concern over that, so we understood that, and we wanted to make this a good partnership with the community, so we decided to remove those panels. We have this picture here because you all just passed your comprehensive plan, updated comprehensive plan not long ago, and we do note that this is outside of the city's opportunity zone. So if this is zone R3, you would need some pretty extensive water and wastewater facilities to serve homes that would be in that area, which after doing some research ourselves would be pretty expensive for the developer to do, probably so expensive that it wouldn't make sense to do. So it would be up to the city to extend those services, which may not be an option. So yeah, that kind of summarizes those last 2 points. And then just some pictures for you all and the general public that might be watching this on TV as well. This is our first solar park next to our P&L's facilities in the Whitewater Valley Station. That went in 2014, and it's 1 megawatt. This is our second that was built, came online in end of 2018. And this is one up in northwestern Indiana, Rensselaer, just under 4 megawatts. I just like to highlight this one because this site there's apartments right there, there's actually single-family homes to the south, there's businesses to the east, so it's really a compatible use with all sorts of folks living and working around it. And then this is from a Bainbridge solar park at our ribbon cutting. We had some kids, and it kind of just shows the fence, and we back up to houses. That's actually pretty common in a lot of our situations. And then just to highlight finally the benefits to Richmond, we get a lot of questions about, well, what do these solar parks do for your community? So it's another stable, low-cost resource that's added to IMPA's power supply portfolio that helps ensure that your rates remain low and stable into the future. If you look at that third bullet point, you'll notice that Richmond Power and Light's rates are about 15 to 33% lower than its area competitors, which is notable and makes us really proud of what we do, trying to make our wholesale side rates as low as possible so that your electric ratepayers can benefit from lower rates. It aids in economic development. All we hear from companies anymore, it seems, is they want to know what the renewable resources look like in communities, and you certainly have a number of those to point to. And it's an investment in our communities. We could build these as seemingly other developers are in cornfields and counties, but we want to bring this investment back home so that you all benefit from the both real and personal property tax payments. It's a forward-thinking approach to power supply portfolio, as we saw from the greenhouse gas inventory presentation. This assists in bringing some of those figures down for you all. And then just community education and involvement opportunities. We're open to any clubs or schools at Earlham or high schools or what have you that might want to visit these sites and learn from them as they seem to be some of the future going forward. So that's what I have for you this evening. I entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions for Emily? Thank you. What was the recommendation from the Plan Commission?
It was unanimously in favor, and we had originally recommended no recommendation for this because it doesn't line up with the future land use map designation, which is for agricultural/rural residential. But we did find that a lot of other goals and strategies, policy recommendations in the comprehensive plan fit very well with solar park development and just general kind of sustainability initiatives.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
This ordinance is on second reading, public comment. Anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition, approach the podium.
Move for engrossment.
Second. Have a motion and a second to engross ordinance 50, 2019. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance is engrossed.
Mr. President,
Mr. Goss.
I move that we suspend the rules and advance ordinance 50, 2019 to third and final reading, read by title only.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and advance ordinance 50, 2019 to third and final reading by title only. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance on third reading.
Ordinance number 50, 2019. Special ordinance amending the zoning map for a certain parcel from high-density, single-family residential district to institution district.
Any other comments by council? Any comments from the mayor?
No comments.
Okay. Clerk, call the roll.
Doug Goss.
Aye.
Kelly Cruz Nicholson.
Aye.
Bill Engel.
Aye.
Jeff Kappa.
Aye.
Jeff Locke.
Aye.
Gary Turner.
Aye.
Jane Bumblew.
Aye.
Larry Parker.
Aye.
And Ron Oler.
Aye.
All are in favor.
Ordinance passes. Thank you.
Ordinance number 3, 2020. A special ordinance authorizing the approval of a statement of benefits for a property owner applying for deductions under Indiana Code 6-1.1-12.1.
This ordinance was sent to the Tax Abatement Committee for due diligence. Do we have a report?
Yes.
Mr. Goss?
Councilman Parker and I visited with Omen last Friday, the 13th. Went over the SB1. This is an abatement for 10 years to retain 134 jobs and create 5 jobs. After reviewing the SB1 with plant manager, we are going to need to amend the ordinance. We went over the list of equipment that they were purchasing with them and the project, and the estimate for this proposed project is actually $4,401,573.
Is that a motion to amend?
So,
Do we have a
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend the ordinance for the third page. The estimated new value to breed $4,401,573. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance is amended.
The average wage meets our expectations, exceeds it, and our recommendation is that we pass this ordinance.
And they include health insurance.
And it includes health insurance. Thank you.
Good deal. Thank you, Mr. Goss. This ordinance is on second reading, public comment. Anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition, please approach the podium.
Move for engrossment.
Second.
A motion and a second to engross ordinance, amended ordinance 3/2020. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance is engrossed. Amended ordinance 3/2020 is engrossed.
Mr. President,
Mr. Goss.
I move that we suspend the rules and advance ordinance, amended ordinance 3/2020 to third and final reading, read by title only.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and advance amended ordinance 3/2020 to third and final reading by title only. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance on third reading.
Ordinance number 3, 2020. A special ordinance authorizing the approval of a statement of benefits for a property owner applying for deductions under Indiana Code 6-1.1-12.1.
Any further comments from council? Any comments from the mayor's office? The clerk, please call the roll.
Doug Goss.
Aye.
Kelly Cruz Nicholson.
Aye.
Bill Engel.
Aye.
Jeff Kappa.
Aye.
Jeff Lott.
Aye.
Gary Turner.
Aye.
Jane Bumbalough.
Aye.
Harry Parker.
Aye.
And Ron Oler.
Aye.
All are in favor.
Ordinance passes. Thank you. Thank you for your support, Omen USA. Any unfinished business to come before council? Before we call for adjournment, I'll remind council members that we're trying to be careful and follow CDC guidelines, so when you leave the building tonight, practice that, I just lost the term. Social distance 3 to 6 feet. Do not shake hands, do not hug, do not kiss. And as you touch door handles leaving the building, don't touch your face until you've cleaned your hands, please.
I'm backing
Do we have a motion?
Move for adjournment.
Second. Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.